whether you want to go with the vertical scaling or horizontal scaling, right? So now it's time to see the practical of it, how to develop an Azure function. So practical makes more sense. So what I'll do is I will create a resource. So whatever is on the slide, I'm showing you on the practical part. So I click on create a resource. It will take me to the screen where I have to search for the resource that I need to work with. Sometimes Azure is a bit slow, so we need to wait. Okay, so I will choose the function app. So I have to choose function app. First of all, I need to select function app because that's like a parent container. Okay, it gave me an option. I clicked on it. So it is taking me to the marketplace to find a template of the function app service. Okay. Okay, it is asking me to sign in again. Sorry for that. Okay, I got signed in automatically. So going back to the marketplace. Okay, so I'll select on function app. Now you'll see when I'm creating a function app, what settings I'm providing, right? Because it is a container where your functions will run. So this will provide the environment for you. So which environment you need, that's what you will specify in the function app. Like name, in which resource group it is created, in which region it is created, right? Which plan you want to use, dedicated, app service plan or premium plan, right? Everything you will define it. So I'm choosing it in like cloud week day 1. What should be the name of the function app? So cloud week function app f app 1, right? That is the name of the function app. Now you want to deploy functions as code or container image. I say code. Okay, which runtime stack means in which technology you want to create functions. So if you choose the technology, so all functions that you will create in that function app must use the same runtime stack because it is providing that machine, that environment for those functions. So I'm choosing Python, right? So I can choose Python or I can choose .NET. So choice will be yours, what you need. So I'm choosing, let's say, uh, Python, right? So I'm choosing Python. Now, which version of Python you would like to use? You can use 3.10, right? Or you can use the other one. So you can choose that, right? Or even you can try to use .NET. So if you choose .NET, which version of .NET you can work with? So you can see that it has an old version and a latest version. So I choose, let's say 4.8. Now, when you selected it, so it is going to ask you in which region you want to create it. So East US region. Now, which operating system? Because you are using .NET 4.8, only Windows is supported. If you choose other version of .NET like 6.0, then Linux is also there. Java, Linux is there. Python, Linux is there. Now, hosting. You want a consumption-based, function premium, or app service. You can see when I'm using consumption-based model serverless, it is not asking me to provide any plan, any resource. It is directly taking me to the storage, networking, and so. Even in the networking, I don't have option to select a network. But if I change the plan here and I say that I want to use a app service plan, it is asking me which app service plan I would like to use, right? So the one I've created before, I can use it. If I choose and even when I click that, if I go back to the network part, you can see networking. So enable network injection, but I cannot have my virtual network. I cannot work with virtual network. Let's try to use the premium one. If I choose the function premium, it is asking me that which Windows plan you want to use. It is creating a new plan with a limited resource like ECUs, memory, and virtual CPU cores. So these are the options that are there, only 3. Then when I click on the networking, you can see it is just I need to check why it is not giving me that. Usually I can configure the network here. I'll check that why it is not coming. Okay. Enable network injection. You can see that I'm creating a new virtual network, right? I can create a virtual network. Now let me see whether I have the same option in the app service, right? Let me see that. So if I choose app service plan and I go to the networking, okay, I can work with the virtual network. Okay, let me see that. So address block region. Okay, I usually app service plan does not allow me to work with the virtual network because in that we have an inbound and outbound request. So we can create a private endpoints to work with it, right? So I need to check this up why this is behaving like that. But definitely there is a difference between the function premium that it maintains the instance in a warmed up stage, and it is based on the consumption based model only, but with added behavior, right? But app service plan is a dedicated 24 into 7 machine which is running. And in this module, we will be working with a consumption based model, and they need a storage account. So I want to create a new storage account for this function, networking, right? Enable network ingestion is not there. Monitoring, right? I can disable the monitoring at present. Deployment, I can enable the GitHub repository so that whenever I publish my code in GitHub, I can push it back to the functions, but at present, no. So I will click review and create. So when my function app is created, now I can create my function inside either from the browser or from the editor like Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code. So this has just given me the environment, right? So just waiting for this, it will take a minute or so. So till the moment it is creating, develop Azure functions. So as I'm talking about here, they will talk about that. What are the components of it? Like what is binding, right? What is function.json file, right? I'll show you that. Then what is the function app? As I discussed with you, function app is like a container, right? Where all the functions are created, and function app will decide that how that environment is created, what runtime you need, what plan you would like to go with, right? What storage account is associated with all the functions that are running in the function app, what will be the default settings like timeout settings. So all these things can be configured within function app. You can even create your functions in your local development environment like Visual Studio and then publish it to the Azure functions. So you can run them locally as well, test them locally, and if you're good with that, then you can publish it to the cloud. But for that, you need to have the Azure toolkit installed in your editor. You can create triggers and bindings. So whenever you have created your function app and you are creating a function, then you have to choose which type of trigger you want to work with: HTTP trigger or schedule trigger, or maybe event trigger. If it is an event trigger, which type of event trigger is which service it is focusing on and which event of that service it is working with. So you have to specify that. And finally, once everything is done, your code is created, right? And that code will have a binding details as well, which is optional, which will decide that what parameters it will going to take. What is the direction of that parameter? It is input type, output type, right? What is the name of the parameter? What is the type of it, right? So it will define everything, and that can be done in the programming language like C Sharp, Java, JavaScript, Python, for in which language you are creating your function. So I will show you whatever I have discussed here. So my function app is created. My function app says that if you just want to see that I have a option here, that is functions. Just loading. Come on, strong here. Okay, so I am just scrolling here and my function app is there. And just give me a second. So I'm just going to the app service editor. Just want to show you something here. So when you click on it, it will show you that how the things are being organized into, right? So I open that setting that is called the app service editor. Now this editor says that open editor. Now it will show you behind the scenes, whatever machine it is preparing, right? What files are stored inside and how the files are being stored. So here it says that there are working files. So whenever you deploy your functions, right, it will be available in the working files where you will see the bin folder and all the DLLs that are deployed and host.json and everything. And this is the main file host.json, which specify the settings. If you want to change the timeout, you can set the timeout property here with a specific timeout that you need. So all the functions that are deployed inside will follow the same set standard, right? So that is the first idea. Then you can see there are development tools like console. So how you want to design your functions, right? You can use the development tools like console or connect to the machine with SSH and work with that. So here with the console, you can create your functions with the CLI. You can create your functions accordingly, right? As well as when we are working with the functions, I can just go to the Visual Studio. So I just close this. I can create a project, and here I can choose Azure function. So I choose Azure function from here. And when I'm choosing Azure function, I click next. I can give it a name, my function one, right? Or my function 1 August, and then click next. And here it is asking me which platform I want to use. So let's say I'm using here .NET 6.0, and I click create. Now, once this project is created, so it has the function1.cs file, right, where I have defined the function name. What should be the name of the function when it is deployed? So there is a class which is available in this namespace, and this namespace belongs to a DLL, right? That has the project name. So my function 1 August DLL has a namespace with the same name, having a class called function1, having a run method, which is recognized by function1. And this method says that I am based on a HTTP trigger, right? And authorization level is function, means whenever you want to call, right, whenever you want to call me, you have to provide the authenticity, means every function will have its own key that you would like to use. Otherwise, you can see there are other options available, that is basically admin key, anonymous, or system or user. So I'm saying that no, each function will have its own URL I would like to work with. You can call this this function with get and post verb, and it is expecting a HTTP request object. And what it is doing, it is basically performing the operation. Like it says that whatever request you have submitted, I want to check in the query if you have provided the name, I will get the name. Or maybe you have provided me the content in the body. So I'm reading the body content. And from that body content, I'm basically deserializing that object. And then I'm checking that whether in the body you have a name key. If you have, then put it here. So it is checking if you have a name here or in the body, then bring it back. And then I am returning the response. What response? If the name is not null, is null or empty, means you have not passed the value of name either in the body or in the query. So I will return this result. Otherwise, I will say hello. Whatever name you have returned, I would like to concatenate it here, and I will return that as an OK object to the caller. So that's what I did. I can change any logic here. I can talk to SQL. I can talk to a storage account. I can talk to any service here. And then I have the host.json file as well, which can override that. So where I can define the timeout setting as well. Now, once I'm done with this, then I can actually deploy that. So I can deploy this right accordingly. So how to deploy that? So you right click on it, right, and you click on publish. So when you are publishing it from here, so you can say, I would like to publish it in Azure, click next. Then where? Azure Functions app with Windows or Linux. Let's say I want to use Linux, right? I can use, if I choose Windows, so it will give me the app which I have already created, right? But it should have the compatible runtime. I choose 4.8 there, but here it is 6.0. So I'm choosing different one. Now, when I click next, it says that there is no instance for it. So I can create a new app instance from here where I would like to publish. So it is going to create a new app for Linux. So I can choose the resource group where I need to deploy, what plan type, consumption, location, East US. Okay, okay, it is using, let's say, the different one, right? So it is using a different one. And then storage account and the function inside if you want monitoring. So I did that. So it is just checking if everything is good. Just give me a minute. It is, let me try to create a new instance again. Okay, now it is giving me, it took little time. So I click on create. So when I click create, it is going to create the app service function app for me, right? Where I would like to publish my function app. So I can choose different type of templates as well to create it, right? So it is HTTP based. So whenever you go with the Visual Studio or any other editor, you can also choose a specific template. You can change the trigger type. It can be HTTP trigger, it can be queue trigger, it can be schedule triggers. So you can define the trigger type. And once this app service plan is created, it is creating a function app, then you will continue further with your deployment phase. And then when you deploy it, the function app is there and it will generate a URL. So whenever you hit that URL, then this function app will execute its logic, right? So that's the main idea behind it. So it is in a process of creation. So I'll just minimize that and I'll go to the slide. So when this function is created, so every function will have the files. Each file will decide that what content it will going to have. Because I'm creating it using the editor, so it will have the function.json file where it will going to store the information about the bindings that you're working with, right? And what is the starting point? That when this function is hit, right, in the DLL, which class, which method it will going to invoke. So that is the complete path that is defined into your files. That is a function file. So as I discussed with you, function.json file contain the trigger action, right? Like which type of trigger you are using, HTTP based or event based or schedule based. And then it's parameters, input and parameters, like what is the name of the parameter, what is its type, input or output, right? Or you, if it is a basically a project created in Java or .NET, which is a compiled code, so it will tell you what is the starting point. So when this function is being called, what will be the starting point that will be invoked? So that is what is mentioned into it. So this is what I was talking about. As you can see, if you look into it, bindings, the type is queue_trigger, right? So the function that you're working with is a queue_trigger, and direction is in, right? Means whenever any message is added into the queue, that message is sent to the parameter called order, whose direction is input, right? And which queue? This is the queue name, and which is available in that particular connection. So in this connection, there is a queue. Whenever item is added in that queue, that item is passed as a input parameter, right, which is called orders. And I can use this order into my code to see what content you have pasted. And after processing it, I will keep the result in a return variable. And that is sent back to the destination, or that is sent back to the destination, which can be the caller or which can be any other service which is integrated with my return type. So I have an option to work with it. Now, this is an example that they're talking about the code. So I have a run method. Like I just check the parameters which you are sending in query or in the body. But what you can do here, you can see you are expecting your object type. Now you are creating your own object called person type. You have a person class. You are creating an object of it. So partition ID is orders. Row key is unique ID, and name is coming from this order. Whatever data you have received from that order, there is a name which you want to say, store it in a name variable. Mobile number is also coming from it. So new person is created. New person object is created with this detail which you are returning it. And what is a person? Person is composed of these parameters. So it is just an example. You can write any logic that you want to have inside your triggers, inside your functions, right? This code is written basically in another language like JavaScript, right? So whenever you are working with JavaScript code, you are creating a function which is taking a context object and order, and you make it as a module which is exported, means which can be called. And you are writing some business logic into it. You're calling some random ID method that is there. So it is written in function.json file, right? Because JavaScript is an interpreted language. .NET is a compiled language. So when you work with the .NET, it will compile the code in DLL. So it only defines the starting point that in this class, this is the method that I would like to call. But in function.json file for JavaScript, the complete code is there, because when it runs, it will interpret line by line and then it executes your logic. So that is the idea behind it. This is a example of a class library. So if you are creating your class, right, if you're creating your class, function name is this, return, it is returning to the table, and this is the output table, which is the name of the table in that connection, maybe storage account. And this run method is performing something. It says that it is a queue trigger, right? Queue trigger. This is the queue from where the item is fetched into this variable. So whenever you add an item into the queue, into this queue within this connection string, then that item is passed to this order variable, which I'm using it here. So every time you add an item to this queue in that connection string, then it will fire this run method. So this is an example of your triggers, right? And you have to work with it. Now let me go back. Okay, it is giving me template deployment fails. Just please be with me for a minute. So so we are almost done. Just I want to show you, just give me a minute. So I'm opening my another editor, Visual Studio 2019. So I'm creating a project here. So just want to show you the templates, right? It is just loading. Okay, so I'll search for Azure functions. So I selected the Azure function, click next. So giving a function name, click create. Now let's see what it gives. So it is asking me what type of trigger you want and which framework you would like to use. So I'm using, let's say, .NET Core 3.1 or 2, right? Just giving an example. So I choose .NET Core 2.0, right? And then I would like to create a HTTP trigger. I would like to create a queue trigger. So you can define that. I'm choosing HTTP trigger here. And then I define the storage account that is associated with that, what authentication level I need, right? So function anonymous admin, I'm choosing function and click create. So once it is created, it will give you the same screen as I was talking about. Same code will be added. And once that code is added, then you have the ability to publish it. So when you are publishing it, it will going to create a zip file, and then it will going to ask you that where it need to be published, right? So you will define the whole path that I want to publish it in a web app. If the web app is not there, you can even create a web app, and then you can specify the various settings associated with that. And once it is deployed, then you can use that function. So it is just loading. Okay, so this function is created as I told you that it is the same code, right? Now I right click on it and then you click publish. Just taking the time, it refreshed that again. So I clicked and click publish. And when you click publish, you will be able to see the options which it requires, right? So it is building, finding some errors. It is trying to find any missing packages. So it is restoring the packages. And once it is finished, then I can publish it. So I can publish that. So just want to show you how to publish it. So when you publish it, you can see that what it is there. So I need to check the dependencies. So just want to show you the flow of it. So I can go to Azure, click next. Then you can find the app service plan, which is associated, find the app function app, which is there. And then once you do that, then you click next, and then you will provide the details that what will be the starting point. So this is the one I selected it, like what I created graphically. So I click finish, and then you will be able to see what it will going to ask you. Okay. So once it is there, right, you can see that there is a publish option, right? And then you start, it is start reading the application, and it is asking me to upgrade the version. So I say yes, and then it will start publishing to the Azure. So this is the flow of it that it uses to publish your code to the cloud, right? And then once it is there, you can go to your cloud and you will find your functions and the respected files into the destination, and you can use it, right? So you will be able to work with that. So that is the idea behind it, how to work with the function apps. And there is a lab in which you will be working with your function apps. So that's it from my side, right? So let's see the practical of it so that you will get to know that how the things work, how these bindings are defined, where it is defined. So as we have already created our function app, so I would like to show you that how I can create a function from our Visual Studio. So I have created a function in Visual Studio. Let me show you how I created it. Then I'll show you how to deploy that. So what I'll do is I will open another instance of my Visual Studio so that you get to know that how the things work. So when Visual Studio 2019 is open, I click on Create New Project, and then I will search for the template that is Azure Functions. So it is just loading the templates. It will take a minute or so. Now I'll search for Azure Functions here. So I search for Azure Function. It will going to give me the template. So I will select this template that I would like to create Azure Function, then click Next. Then it is asking me what name you want to give. So I can give it a name like function 1, function 2, or my function, whatever you need. So let's say my demo function. And then I click Next, Create. So now I'm expecting here that it should ask me that what type of function I would like to create. So I'm choosing the framework. So I'll start with .NET Core 2.0, which I can upgrade at the time of publishing it. Then it is asking me which template you want to use. Empty. You want to create an event trigger, that is service bus queue trigger. When item is added into the queue trigger, you want to execute it. You want to create a HTTP trigger, timer trigger, means schedule trigger, or what type of trigger you want to create. Blob trigger, when item is added into the storage account blob container, then you want to do something. What type of trigger you want. So we have different options available. So I'll go with the HTTP trigger, and then it is asking me which storage account you would like to use. So I can browse to the storage account that I have with me. So it is trying to connect to my profile, and then it says that we have different storage accounts. So I can choose one of the storage account and I click OK, or I can create a new one as well. So I click OK. Then how you want to authenticate your request. So you need a function key, or you want anonymous users can access it, or admin key. Means at a function app level, we have a keys that I would like to use. If I choose admin, same key is used to call multiple functions, but I say no, function level authentication. Now I will click create. So once I create it, it will going to create a function app for me. So it is creating a project. It is basically scaffolding the files that are there from the template. So we need to wait for this project to create. Okay, so almost there. It took me to the slide because it is refreshing the Visual Studio. So I'm just waiting for it. So now my function is ready in Visual Studio. Now it is downloading some dependencies. So there are packages which it need to install. So it is trying to restore them. So it is creating a project, then getting the dependencies. And till the moment it is downloading it, I would like to show you that it has a file called function1.cs, that is C# file, where it says that there is a namespace called my demo function, which is available in a DLL with the project name, that is my function, my demo function. So the DLL name is same as the namespace. So that DLL has a namespace called my demo function. When you press dot, it will show there is a class called function1, and then within that function there is a within that class there is a function called run method, and I want that when it is deployed it will be available with a name called function1. And this run method says that actually I'm based on a HTTP trigger. So it means that it will generate a URL that I will give it to my customers and they can forcibly call it. Whenever they want, they have to hit that URL. And if they want to call it, they have to provide the authenticity. That is a key that is provided by function. And you can call that URL with get or post verb. And it is expecting a request object, HTTP request object. And then if you scroll down, when it runs, it is just logging some information, and it is expecting that in the request, do you have passed anything in the query string with the key called name? If you have, I want to fetch the value, as well as I'm also checking the body. So I am actually creating a string variable which contain the content of the body. Right, then I'm deserializing that object, and then what I'm doing it, I'm checking that whatever data you have deserialized it, whether it has any key with a name. If it has, then I would like to get it here. So it is checking whether you have something in the query parameter or in the body. Now, once you have this result, then it is checking that do you have any value in the name? If it is empty, means you have not passed anything either in the query string or in the body, then what should be the response? If it is blank, then response should be this: the HTTP trigger function executes successfully. Pass a name in the query string or the body to customize the response. Otherwise, it will say hello. Whatever name you have passed will be displayed here. And it said this HTTP trigger function executes successfully. This is what we did. Now it's time for us to publish it. But you can see there is a host.json file as well, where you can configure the timeout settings and other settings. Now, if you need to publish it to the cloud, so you have to right click on the project and then you have to click on publish. Then when you publish it, it will ask you to create a profile. And in that, you have to set the target where you need to publish. I say, I would like to publish it in Azure. You click next. Then it is trying to connect to the account which has a valid subscription. And it says that I found one app there, which we created just a few minutes before. So this is a function app that we created, and I want to publish it there. And then I click finish. So once it is finished, so it will going to take some time to publish this code or publish this project into that function app as a new function. So it is going to zip the project and then upload that zip file into the function app. So we will wait for a certain time, and once it is done, then you will be able to see the output. So it is trying to create a zip file. I'm just waiting for that task to complete. So I'll click on publish now. So it has zipped it. So I'm going to click publish. Let's see what is the outcome of it now. So reading the Azure application settings. Connecting to the publish target where it has to publish. It is starting building your project. So build has started. Now publish has started. And then it is running some command internally to create a zip file and upload that it into the function app that we have selected it. So we are waiting for this to succeed. Yes, it is succeeded, right? So publish has succeeded. Now it's time for me to go to that function app and I refresh this page. So when I refresh this page, right, I'll just refresh the complete page. So I'm expecting that it should create a function there. So as I discussed with you, that it will going to create your function there with the name function1, right? And it is available in a respected class. So now once it gets loaded, I will show you that there is a function added into my function app. So this is my function app. And once it gets loaded in the overview page, you will find a function tab where a function is created. So in the function tab, function 1 is there and it is enabled. Now, when I click on this function, I'm getting inside that function. Now you can see that it has various options available on the left side. So first of all, I'll show you the integration. So when you get into the integration, so it is created in Visual Studio, so you can't do much on the integration side here, but let me show you what it look like. So it says that there is a function 1 that you created, and it is based on HTTP trigger, which is expecting a request object. And this function is basically performing some operation. What operation it is performing? I can click on code plus test. So when I click on code plus test, you can see that function is there. So it is just loading. So it says that in this app, there is a function called function1, and it has function.json file. And this JSON file basically contains the complete information about that which framework I'm using, then bindings. There is a HTTP trigger. There is a trigger type is HTTP trigger, and it has a method which can be called with get and post, HTTP verb get and post. And you have to provide your function level authentication, and it is expecting a request object. Right. And when you call that, where this function is available, this function is available in a DLL called my demo function DLL. If you look into your project, right, so the project name is my demo function. So it will have a DLL created. When you compile your project, it will going to create a DLL for that. Right. And within that DLL, there is a namespace called my demo function, which has a class called my function having a run method. So you can see here, as I discussed, that DLL has a namespace called my demo function, having a class called function1, which has a run method. So that is a starting point, right? So this is the idea behind it. And if you look into it, that is only file. Now, if it is written in JavaScript, then you will have your code here. Complete code will be here, right? But it is created in a language like C# or maybe Java. So it is a compiled code. That's why it used DLL. Now, if you want to see whether it is working or not, so you will get a function URL. So I'll copy this URL and you pasted it here. So you can see this URL is taking some key that ends with EQA. So what is it? If you go to the function key, you will see that this is a function level authentication key, which I am using it in my request. So it ends with same one. This is the same key that I am appending it to with my function. Now I'm not passing any name parameter, so it will going to give me the HTTP trigger function execute successfully, pass a name in the query string or in the body. So that is the message that is this one. This is the message that it has returned. But now, if I just pass the name parameter like and name equals to Sachin, so you will see it give me hello Sachin. That is the second one, right? So it shows that my function is working very well. So I can give this URL to you and you can work with it. Now, last thing which I would like to tell you here, that when you are into your function app, so I was showing you this option that is called App Service Editor, which is in preview. Now, once it gets loaded, I open the editor and you will see the respected files that are there. So now you can see that I have a bin folder created. In that bin folder, you have all the files that your project has deployed, and there is a my demo DLL function, right? So that is what your function app was specifying. Your function app specified that there is a bin folder where there is a DLL called the my demo function DLL, and it has a class called function1, right, which contain the code called run. Now that is what JSON file is here. So it says that in bin folder there is a DLL, and this DLL, that is this DLL, has this namespace having a class called function1 and having a run method. So that's what it is defined, right? So that is the idea behind it. So this is how you can create your function programmatically and deploy it there, right? So you have the respected file and where you have your details about your bindings, starting point, and everything. So now if I go back to the slide, so I discussed with you, I shown it to you how this file look like. That is function.json. And that's they're talking about all triggers and bindings have a direction property in function.json file. So you can define the property of a function, whether the parameter like it is input type or output type. So that defines that whether you have to pass the value or whether function is calculating that value and returning it to the destination. Sometimes one parameter can act as an input and output type, but for that you will get a specific editor like advanced editor when you are working with, and then you can configure the setting there. Now this is the file that look like. Now create triggers and bindings. So you can see if it depends upon what trigger. I'm using HTTP trigger, so it is having just the type and direction and the parameter. But if it is a queue trigger or blob trigger, so the binding file, the function.json file will be different, right? It will have some other parameters as well. Let's say it has an input and output type both. But in my case, I have only input type. So here there are two bindings. One is input type. The parameter is called order, which is of input type, right? And where it is coming from? It is coming from the my queue item. That is a queue which is available in this connection string. Means whenever item is added in this queue available in this connection string, that item will be sent as a message into the variable called orders because it is input type. And when your function return a result, that result will be stored in a variable called $result return, and then it will act as output parameter. And whatever is there will be sent it to the destination, what you can configure. So that's a binding type. And now this is the code. So run method, it hardly matters what you want to write. It depends upon the business logic. In my case, I have just written a logic that whenever you call it, I'm checking the key in the query parameter or in the body, and I'm just working on it. But you can write your own logic depending on your business needs. So in this case, they are expecting an order object, and they are preparing a new person object, which is of this type using the orders data. So order has a name, order has a mobile number. From there, they're fetching the value and providing it to the name and mobile number property of this person object, and then returning this person object later. Same thing you can do it with your JavaScript. So you can create a function with a JavaScript. So in my function.json file, I have a DLL because it's a compiled code. But if you create a code with JavaScript, you will be able to see your code directly there, and you can modify that code as well. So that is the benefit of your function app, that it provides multiple languages to create your functions. This is an example of queue trigger. So whenever you create a queue trigger, right? So you say there is a method called run, which returns a person object, and it is a queue trigger type. Means whenever any item is added into this queue available in this connection string, then it will going to call this run method and pass that item into this variable so that you can process it. But I want to when this function is deployed, I want this function should be available with this name called queue trigger table output. And where it will going to return the result, that is in a table called output table in that connection string. So whatever it is returning will be stored in that output table. That is a return type. So that's the end of the topic with the demonstration which I have shown it to you. Hopefully you have enjoyed it, and if you have any doubts, we can discuss it in the next session. Thank you for joining me today. Hopefully you have enjoyed the day one. We still have 4 more days. So see you tomorrow at the same time. Thanks a lot and have a great day ahead. Bye bye.